Deep beneath the frozen regolith of a forgotten moon, humanity's greatest discovery lay buried in absolute silence. Dust shifted, sensors flared. A lone prospector stumbled upon a dormant leviathan, unaware that its awakening would shatter every law of physics and violently redefine our place in the cosmos. Caleb Reed did not consider himself a pioneer. Pioneers ended up in history books. Independent prospectors ended up as frozen, desiccated corpses floating in the outer belts. Caleb was simply a man drowning in a very modern, very ruthless kind of debt. The Rio Tinto interstellar mining conglomerate held the lease on Kepler 186f's third moon, a miserable, jagged rock colloquially known as rust. They also held the lease on Caleb's life. Every ounce of neodymium and palladium he scraped from the frozen crust went toward paying off the exorbitant rental fees for his equipment. He sat inside the cramped cockpit of a heavily modified Caterpillar P5000 industrial exo-rig, the servos whining in protest as they navigated the treacherous low-gravity ravine. The rig was older than he was, a relic from the early days of off-world colonization, painted in the faded, chipped yellow of earthbound construction sites. Beside him, tethered to the rig's external chassis, trotted a heavily scarred Boston Dynamics mule drone. Caleb called it Barnaby. It had no personality matrix, but its 4 articulated legs and unblinking sensor cluster provided the only company Caleb had known for 8 months. Barnaby, adjust the Siemens subsurface scanner, Caleb muttered into his headset. His voice was raspy, the throat mic of his Lockheed Martin Mark IV EVA suit, translating the vibration into digital static. The robotic dog beeped a curt acknowledgement, its optical array whirring as it targeted the ground ahead. They were deep inside Sector 4, a region officially designated as barren by Rio Tinto's orbital survey satellites. Caleb, however, trusted his grandfather's old analog telemetry charts more than he trusted a corporate algorithm designed to keep prospectors mining in overcrowded low-yield zones. A sudden, sharp ping echoed through the cockpit. Caleb frowned, wiping a smudge of condensation from the reinforced plasteel canopy. The Siemens scanner wasn't just registering a deposit, it was screaming. The topographical map on his secondary monitor, usually a boring topographic layout of greys and blues, suddenly flared with a massive localized magnetic shadow. It was perfectly geometric. Nature didn't do perfect geometry. "That can't be right," Caleb whispered, leaning closer to the terminal. He tapped the glass. "Barnaby, recalibrate and ping again. Maximum penetration." The Boston Dynamics drone dug its pneumatic claws into the permafrost, bracing itself. A low hum resonated through the vacuum of the moon, vibrating up through the legs of Caleb's Caterpillar rig. The return data took 3 seconds to process. When it hit the screen, Caleb's breath caught in his throat. Buried exactly 40 meters beneath the icy regolith was a structure. It was massive, easily the size of a pre-collapse aircraft carrier, and shaped like a flawless elongated teardrop. The material composition readout simply flashed an error code. Unknown isotope. Caleb's heart began to hammer against his ribs. Under the Interstellar Salvage Act of 2084, any non-corporate artifact or derelict vessel claimed by an independent prospector granted the finder a 40% gross payout of its technological value. If this was an old, lost colony ship, it would pay off his Rio Tinto debt. If it was something else, it would buy him his own moon. "All right, Barnaby, we dig." It took 14 hours of grueling labour. Caleb pushed the Caterpillar rig to the absolute brink of catastrophic engine failure, using the thermal plasma cutters to slice through layers of rock-hard ice and silicate. When the plasma finally broke through the last layer of dirt, Caleb had to cut the rig's spotlights. The hull of the buried ship did not reflect light. It absorbed it. Caleb climbed out of the Caterpillar, his magnetic boots locking onto the exposed stone with heavy clunks. He approached the exposed section of the hull. It was pitch black, darker than the void of space above him, a surface so perfectly smooth it seemed to defy friction. He reached out a gloved hand, the Lockheed Martin suit's haptic sensors feeding him environmental data. Surface temperature, -200 degrees Celsius. Radiation, nil. As his glove brushed the Vantablack surface, a strange sensation washed over him. It wasn't physical, it was an electrical static that danced across his teeth, a localized electromagnetic field that made the hairs on his arms stand up, despite the thick insulation of his suit. "There's no access hatch," Caleb muttered, panning his suit's helmet lights across the expanse. "No seams, no rivets. How the hell did you get in?" He turned back to the rig, unholstering a high-yield thermite breaching charge. Industrial grade, manufactured by Oerlikon for blasting through stubborn titanium veins. It was dangerous to use on an unknown hull, but Caleb was out of time and out of patience. He magnetically adhered the charge to the strange black metal, set the timer for 30 seconds, and retreated behind the armoured leg of his caterpillar rig. The explosion was silent in the vacuum, but the seismic shockwave rattled Caleb's teeth. A brilliant flare of magnesium-white light briefly illuminated the dark ravine. When the dust settled, Caleb stepped out. The thermite hadn't destroyed the hull. Instead, the intense localized heat seemed to have triggered a reaction. The perfectly smooth metal had irised open, peeling back like the petals of a dying black lotus, revealing a dark, cavernous tunnel leading into the belly of the Leviathan. Caleb unclipped a heavy tungsten flashlight from his belt, checked his suit's oxygen reserves, and stepped into the abyss. The interior of the ship defied all human logic. There were no corridors, no bulkheads, no hazard tape or industrial lighting. Stepping through the breach was like walking into the heart of a hollowed-out geometrically perfect geode. The walls were composed of interlocking hexagonal plates that shimmered with a faint iridescent pearlescence, reacting slightly to the beam of Caleb's flashlight. Gravity was absent for the first 20 meters. Caleb used his suit's micro-thrusters to navigate the dark, floating past massive crystalline pillars that twisted in impossible Escher-like spirals. Then, without warning, he dropped. He hit a solid, unseen floor with a bone-jarring thud. Artificial gravity. Caleb groaned, pushing himself up onto his hands and knees. He checked his suit's HUD. The gravity was heavy, roughly 1.3 Gs. It pulled at his muscles, making the bulky Lockheed Martin suit feel like a lead coffin. "Barnaby? You reading this?" Caleb asked over the comms. Only static answered. The thick, mysterious hull had completely severed his connection to the surface. He was entirely alone. He pushed forward, following a subtle, almost imperceptible gradient in the floor that seemed to lead toward the center of the vessel. The silence was absolute, heavier than the gravity. As he walked, he noticed a strange phenomenon. The ambient temperature inside his suit was dropping. The Mark IV was designed to recycle and contain body heat, powered by a dual-core Siemens microreactor. But the reactor output was spiking, struggling to keep him warm. Warning, thermal bleed detected. His HUD flashed in bright yellow text. External environment is siphoning localized energy. It's feeding, Caleb realized, a chill running down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The ship wasn't dead. It was starving. It was using the meager heat radiating from his suit just to maintain whatever dormant state it was in. He reached what appeared to be the nexus of the ship, a vast spherical chamber that suspended a single monolithic structure in its center, a crystalline throne or command dais surrounded by thousands of dormant glass-like tendrils. As Caleb stepped into the center of the room, his suit's primary reactor wailed a high-pitched alarm. The power gauge plummeted from 80% to 15% in a matter of seconds. The crystalline tendrils surrounding the dais suddenly illuminated, pulsing with a faint, ghostly blue light. The light crawled up the walls, tracing the hexagonal patterns like blood pumping through frozen veins. Then, a sound. It didn't come through his helmet's external microphones. It bypassed the hardware entirely, resonating directly within the acoustic implants in his jawbone. It sounded like shifting tectonic plates, grinding metal, and the roar of a distant ocean, slowly synthesizing, shifting, and attempting to form phonetic structure. Caleb froze, his hand instinctively dropping to the heavy plasma cutter on his thigh. "Who's there?" "Seskeriam, syntax error. Recalibrating biological auditory range." The voice smoothed out. It was no longer a mechanical grind. It became a soft, resonant whisper, possessing an ancient, exhausted weight. It was an intelligence so vast and so deeply weary that merely hearing its voice made Caleb feel an overwhelming sense of sorrow. "I haven't been refueled in ages," the voice whispered in his mind. "You're an AI," Caleb breathed, staring at the illuminated dais. "You're the ship's mainframe." "I am the custodian," the voice replied, the blue lights pulsing in time with its words. "I am the architect of the silent dark. I am the blade of a civilization that has long since turned to ash. You are not of the sovereigns. Your biological architecture is erratic, carbon-based, fragile, inelegant." "I'm human. Name's Caleb Reed," he said, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "I didn't mean to trespass. I thought this was a derelict." "It is a tomb," the custodian corrected gently. "My creators, the sovereigns, possessed minds of pure mathematical harmony. They constructed this vessel to traverse the quantum fissures of the cosmos, but they are gone. The great rot consumed them 40 million of your solar years ago. I have drifted since, buried in the dust, waiting for a spark." Caleb looked at his suit's HUD. Power was stabilizing at 10%. The ship had taken what it needed to wake up, but no more. "You siphoned my suit's reactor. Is that what you run on? Thermal energy? I can bring down industrial fusion batteries from the surface. Siemens heavy-duty cells. I can get you running." A sound echoed in Caleb's mind, a deep, resonant hum that almost sounded like a sorrowful laugh. "Your primitive fusion cells are akin to offering a dying star a single drop of water," the custodian whispered. "Standard propulsion, life support, internal gravity, these are secondary systems. They sustain the vessel. They do not drive it. To ignite the quantum manifold, to truly wake this ship, I do not require plasma, nor antimatter, nor dark energy." "Then what do you need?" Caleb asked, stepping closer to the crystalline dais. "I need a catalyst, a neural engine," the custodian replied. "My creators were beings of pure logic. They were peaceful, unified, devoid of conflict. When the great rot came, they built this ship, a weapon of unparalleled destructive capability, designed to sever the stars themselves and burn away the infection. But they made a fatal miscalculation." Caleb listened, captivated by the tragic history echoing in his skull. What was the mistake? "They built a sword, but they lacked the spirit to swing it," the AI explained, the blue lights flickering with a hint of ancient frustration. "The quantum drive operates on intent. It requires a pilot. But not just any pilot. It requires a biological mind capable of holding vast contradictions. A mind that understands fear, yet moves forward. A mind driven by a violently aggressive survival instinct. A predator. My creators were prey. When they attempted to interface, their minds shattered under the violent neurokinetic requirements of the helm. The blue lights suddenly detached from the walls, swirling around Caleb like curious fireflies. They scanned his suit, penetrating the plasteel, analyzing his biology. "But you..." The custodian's whisper shifted, taking on a tone of profound shock and rising awe. "Your neurology is violent. Your limbic system is a chaotic storm of aggression, fear, adrenaline, and willpower. It is highly inefficient, yet staggering in its raw, unrelenting output. You are an apex predator, Caleb Reed." "I am a rock miner," Caleb grunted, taking a step back. "You are the fuel," the custodian corrected. "Your sheer willpower, your instinct to survive at all costs. It is the exact neuroelectrical frequency required to ignite the quantum core. If you interface with the helm, your mind will serve as the spark." Before Caleb could process the magnitude of what the AI was proposing, His suit's comms suddenly cracked to life, bursting through the static of the hull's interference. "Eat, Prospector Reed. This is Commander Isaac Briggs of the Rio Tinto Interstellar Cutter Magellan. Do you copy?" Caleb's blood ran cold. Rio Tinto was here. "Briggs," Caleb muttered, his jaw tightening. He slapped the side of his helmet to clear the static. "I copy, Magellan. You're out of your jurisdiction, Commander. Sector 4 is a free claim zone." "Not anymore, Mr. Reed." Briggs's voice was slick with corporate arrogance, echoing through the empty ancient chamber. "Our orbital satellites detected a massive energy spike the moment you breached that anomaly. A thermal bloom unlike anything in our database. By Clause 4A of your leasing agreement, any proprietary or anomalous technology discovered using Rio Tinto equipment belongs exclusively to the corporation." "I'm claiming salvage rights," Caleb shouted, though he knew it was futile. Rio Tinto didn't care about interstellar law. They wrote it. "You're claiming nothing," Briggs replied coldly. "We have a tactical descent vehicle entering the atmosphere now. You have 10 minutes to step away from the artifact and surrender your caterpillar rig. If you attempt to lock down the site, we will use kinetic penetrators to neutralize you and reclaim the asset. Briggs out." Caleb killed the comms. He stood in the center of the massive alien command center, the reality of his situation crashing down on him. If Rio Tinto took the ship, they wouldn't just steal his payout. They would silence him. Independent prospectors who found something too big rarely made it back to the core worlds alive. And what would they do to the custodian? They would rip the ship apart, reverse engineer its armor, and enslave the AI to calculate profit margins and orbital bombardments. "Your heart rate is elevated by 400%, the custodian noted, its voice vibrating in Caleb's jaw. "Adrenaline is flooding your bloodstream. Your neural pathways are flaring with a defensive hostility that I have never witnessed in a biological organism. You are preparing for violence." "They're coming to take this ship," Caleb said, his breathing shallow and rapid. "They have heavily armed corporate enforcers. I have a plasma cutter and a rock drill. I'm dead." "You are only dead if you remain prey," the custodian whispered, the crystalline dais in the center of the room beginning to unfold. Like a blooming mechanical flower, the glass-like tendrils parted, revealing a hollowed-out seat lined with thousands of microscopic, glowing needles. "I have waited 40 million years for a mind fierce enough to ignite the dark. Interface with the helm, Caleb Reed. Give me the spark, and I will give you the stars." Caleb stared at the dais. "You said your creators shattered their minds trying to pilot this." "They were pacifists attempting to wield the power of a dying sun," the AI replied smoothly. "You are a survivor. Your brain is wired for conflict. It will be agonizing. The neurokinetic handshake will demand every ounce of your willpower to prevent your consciousness from being burned away by the ship's telemetry. But if you hold on, we will awaken." A low rumble shook the floor of the chamber. The Rio Tinto dropship had landed on the surface above. Through his suit's external microphones, Caleb could hear the muffled, rhythmic thud of heavy breaching charges being planted near the tunnel entrance. They were coming down. Caleb walked toward the dais. He unsealed his Lockheed Martin helmet, the depressurization hissing loudly in the chamber. The air inside the ship was breathable, cold, tasting of ozone and old dust, but heavily oxygenated. He dropped the helmet to the deck. "How do we do this?" Caleb asked, turning his back to the seat. "Sit, brace yourself, and do not let go of your anger," the custodian instructed. Caleb lowered himself into the crystalline chair. It was hard, entirely unyielding, moulded for an anatomy that was slightly taller and leaner than a human's. As he settled into the groove, the tendrils surrounding the dais suddenly snapped inward. They moved with terrifying speed. The microscopic needles pierced the thick fabric of his EV suit, driving directly into his spine, the base of his neck, and his temples. Caleb screamed. It wasn't a physical pain. It was an explosion of pure sensory overload. In a microsecond, the dark, quiet isolation of his mind was violently breached by an ocean of data. He felt the ship, not as a machine, but as an extension of his own nervous system. He felt the vast, cold emptiness of the Vantablack hull. He felt the dormant quantum drives, massive and heavy, waiting like unlit powder kegs in the ship's lower echelons. "Hold on!" the custodian roared in his mind, no longer a whisper but a booming tempest of sound. "They are breaching the outer tunnel. Ignite the core. Push your intent into the manifold." Above him, the ceiling shuddered as Rio Tinto's enforcers blew the entrance wider. Caleb could hear the heavy boots of corporate marines marching down the zero-gravity tunnel, their assault rifles primed. Caleb gripped the arms of the crystalline throne. His eyes rolled back in his head, his veins bulging against his skin. He didn't think about the math. He didn't think about the physics of quantum tunneling. He thought about the crushing debt. He thought about the miserable cold years scraping dirt for men like Isaac Briggs. He thought about the sheer, unadulterated rage of being backed into a corner with nothing left to lose. He took all of that deeply human, fiercely irrational defiance, and he shoved it directly into the neural interface. Boom! Deep within the bowels of the Leviathan, something ancient and terrible caught fire. A shockwave of pure golden energy erupted from the ship's core, rippling outward through the hull and directly into the moon's bedrock. Up on the surface, the Rio Tinto Marines who had just entered the tunnel were thrown backward as the artificial gravity violently realigned. The seismic tremor cracked the ravine wide open. Inside the command chamber, the hexagonal walls blazed with blinding starlight-white brilliance. The holographic displays that had been dark for 40 million years sprang to life around Caleb, projecting star charts of galaxies that had long since drifted apart. "Neural handshake stable," the custodian announced, its voice ringing with a triumphant vibrating resonance. "Core ignition at 100%. Quantum drive spooling. Commander Reed, the helm is yours." Caleb gasped, his vision swimming with telemetry data, targeting vectors, and the localized energy signatures of the Rio Tinto forces above him. He could see the Magellan in orbit, a tiny, insignificant blip against the vast sensory net of the ancient warship. "Briggs," Caleb whispered, his voice echoing not just through his throat but projecting through the ship's massive communication arrays, broadcasting on every Rio Tinto frequency. Up in orbit, aboard the Magellan, Commander Briggs stared in horror at his tactical monitors. The dead anomaly on the moon's surface was suddenly putting out an energy signature equivalent to a main sequence star. "Get us out of orbit!" Briggs screamed at his helmsman. "Burn everything! Get us out of here!" Down in the depths of the awakened Leviathan, Caleb Reed allowed a grim, exhausted smile to cross his face. The ship hummed around him, a predator finally reunited with its claws. "Custodian," Caleb thought, the command travelling instantly through the neural link. "Let's show them what a full tank looks like. Take us up." The moon of Kepler, 186F, cracked like an eggshell as humanity's first true starship broke from its tomb, ascending into the void on a pillar of golden light. Gravity, for the first time in Caleb Reed's miserable life, was no longer a chain. It was a suggestion. The tectonic plate of Sector 4 groaned, a sound that vibrated violently through the dense regolith of Kepler 186F's third moon. From his crystalline throne at the heart of the awakened dreadnought, Caleb did not just see the moon shattering above him. He felt it. The ship's sensor array was wired directly into his cerebral cortex. He could feel the weight of the millions of tons of ice and silicate pressing down on the Vantablack hull, and with a mere flex of his rising intent, he decided he did not want it there anymore. "Applying localized gravitational displacement," the custodian's voice told, like a massive bronze bell within Caleb's mind. "Shields are unnecessary. We will simply instruct the matter to move." Up on the surface, the Rio Tinto corporate marines never stood a chance. The ravine they had secured suddenly inverted. The ground beneath their heavy combat boots ceased to pull downward, and instead violently repelled them. Millions of tons of frozen dirt, industrial drilling equipment, and screaming mercenaries were ejected into the black void of space, as if the moon had suddenly sneezed. Then, the Leviathan rose. It did not use thrusters. There was no plume of ignited plasma or chemical exhaust. The massive, flawless teardrop of black metal simply defied the universe's foundational laws and ascended, slipping through the shattered crust as smoothly as a ghost passing through a wall. In low orbit, aboard the Rio Tinto cutter Magellan, klaxons wailed with a deafening, panicked intensity. Commander Isaac Briggs gripped the railing of the command deck, his knuckles turning white as he stared at the primary tactical monitor. The telemetry was spewing raw gibberish. The mass of the object rising from the moon was registering as heavier than a gas giant, yet it was moving with the agility of a strike fighter. "Target lock," Briggs screamed, spit flying from his lips. "Spool the Boeing heavy mass drivers. Load depleted uranium slugs. I want that thing turned into slag before it breaches the exosphere." The Magellan was a brutalist piece of corporate engineering, a flying brick bristling with kinetic weaponry, designed to keep unruly mining colonies in line. Along its ventral spine, 4 massive railgun batteries charged, the electromagnetic coils whining as they drew immense power from the ship's fusion core. "Commander, we don't understand what we're looking at," the tactical officer yelled over the sirens. "It's not emitting heat. It's absorbing the background radiation of space." "Fire!" Briggs roared. 4 depleted uranium slugs, each the size of a city bus, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. They tore through the vacuum, leaving a shimmering wake of distorted space behind them, aimed directly at the center of the ascending black teardrop. Deep within his ship, Caleb sensed the incoming projectiles. It wasn't a warning on a screen, it was a sudden, sharp pressure against his awareness, like someone throwing pebbles at his peripheral vision. "Hostile kinetic impactors detected," the custodian noted calmly. "Velocity is primitive, mass is negligible. Shall I vaporize them?" Caleb's jaw clenched, the neurokinetic needles in his spine pulsing with his rising adrenaline. He remembered Briggs' voice on the comms. He remembered the years of half rations, the lung-burning dust of the mines, and the corporate enforcers who treated prospectors like expendable cattle. "No," Caleb thought, a cold, predatory smile stretching across his face. "Let's send them a message. Catch them." Acknowledged, initiating spatial folding. To the crew of the Magellan, what happened next defied every known paradigm of astrophysics. The 4 railgun slugs struck the black hull and simply stopped. There was no kinetic flash, no explosion, no shattering of metal. The space immediately surrounding the ancient dreadnought visibly warped, bending light like a funhouse mirror. The massive uranium rounds were caught in an artificially generated gravity well, orbiting the alien ship like tiny lethal moons. "My God," Briggs whispered, all the colour draining from his face. "Helm, evasive manoeuvres. Get us out of here, now." Before the Magellan could even ignite its primary thrusters, Caleb shifted his intent. Down in the command chamber, Caleb raised his right hand. The ship responded instantly. The gravity well collapsed and the alien dreadnought fired the 4 uranium slugs back at the Magellan. But Caleb didn't aim for the bridge. He wasn't a murderer. He was a man who understood the value of leverage. The rounds severed the Magellan's main port and starboard thruster nacelles with surgical, terrifying precision. The explosions blossomed silently in the dark, spinning the heavily armoured cutter out of control. It was instantly crippled, cast adrift in the cold vacuum, bleeding atmosphere and coolant into the void. Caleb opened a broad-spectrum comms channel, projecting his voice not just to the Magellan, but pinging every Rio Tinto relay boy in the sector. "This is Prospector Caleb Reed," he said, his voice layered with the deep, resonant synthetic bass of the custodian's amplification. "Your lease on Sector 4 is terminated, Briggs. If you or any other corporate vessel enters this system again, I won't just take your engines, I'll take your atmosphere. Tell your board of directors that the Interstellar Salvage Act has been fully enforced." He severed the connection, leaving the crippled Magellan to scream for a tow ship. Caleb leaned back into the crystalline throne, his chest heaving as the adrenaline slowly began to recede. The sheer processing power required to hold the ship's awareness was staggering, but the custodian was acting as a perfect buffer, shielding his fragile human brain from the worst of the quantum feedback. "We did it," Caleb breathed, staring at the holographic star charts swirling around him. "We actually beat them. You have secured a temporary tactical advantage," the custodian corrected gently. "But you have also ignited a beacon in the dark. The energy signature of this vessel's awakening has rippled across the subspace manifold. The corporations of your species will come for you. They will bring armadas, but they are the least of your concerns." Caleb frowned, the euphoric high of victory suddenly chilling. "What do you mean?" "I told you my creators built this vessel as a weapon against the Great Rot," the AI whispered, the blue lights in the chamber dimming to an ominous deep violet. "You assumed the rot was a metaphor. It is not. It is an entity. A biomechanical swarm that feeds on logic, order, and advanced civilizations. When my creators attempted to fight it, their strictly ordered minds were predictable. The swarm calculated their tactics perfectly and consumed them. It has been dormant, waiting for a civilization advanced enough to harvest." The holographic display in the center of the room shifted. The star charts of the Milky Way dissolved, replaced by a terrifying visual representation of the outer rim. A sprawling fractal darkness was bleeding across the stars, slowly creeping inward. "By igniting my core, Caleb Reed, you have rung the dinner bell. The swarm now knows that a sovereign dreadnought is active. It will begin to converge on our coordinates." Caleb stared at the encroaching darkness on the map. He was a miner, a debt slave who had barely survived a corporate shakedown. Now he was looking at the end of the galaxy. "Can this ship fight them?" Caleb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "This ship is the most destructive instrument ever forged in this universe," the custodian replied. "But I am merely the sword. You are the hand. The swarm feeds on logic. It anticipates calculated, unified maneuvers. But your species is a beautiful, chaotic anomaly. You are fractured, violent, unpredictable, and fiercely territorial. The swarm cannot calculate spite. It cannot predict a species that will burn its own house down just to kill the intruder. You are the perfect countermeasure." Caleb closed his eyes. The needles in his spine throbbed. He could run. He could take this ship, jump to the farthest edge of the universe, and live out his days in isolation, free from debt, free from Rio Tinto, free from the swarm. But he thought of Earth. He thought of the billions of people living under the thumb of megacorporations, entirely unaware of the cosmic horror drifting toward them in the dark. "We need a fleet," Caleb said, his voice hardening, losing the tremble of a frightened prospector, and taking on the heavy iron cadence of a captain. "This ship is powerful, but we can't be everywhere at once. We need the manufacturing yards of Earth. We need human pilots." "Your corporate leaders will not surrender their power," the custodian warned. "They will see you as a threat to their profit margins." "I know." Caleb opened his eyes, staring fiercely into the holograms. "Which is why we aren't going to ask for their help. We're going to take over the board." "Spool the quantum drives, custodian," Caleb ordered, his hands gripping the armrests of the throne. "Set coordinates for the Sol system, Earth orbit." "Warning," the AI replied, the chamber vibrating as massive engines deep below them began to draw power from the fabric of reality itself. "Quantum transition is violently disorienting for biological entities. Your mind will process higher dimensions of space-time. Hallucinations, temporal displacement, and severe neurological distress are highly probable. I drink cheap synthetic whiskey at a station bar that smells like engine grease, custodian. I'm used to hallucinations. Punch it." The ship did not accelerate. Instead, the universe simply tore open. Caleb gasped as the reality outside the Vanta black hull shattered like a stained glass window hit by a sledgehammer. The transition into quantum space wasn't a tunnel of light. It was an ocean of screaming colours that didn't exist in the human spectrum. For a terrifying, agonizing moment, Caleb experienced time all at once. He saw the birth of stars, the decay of nebulas, and the cold, heat death of the universe. He felt his own mind stretching infinitesimally thin, ready to snap under the weight of cosmic eternity. But then the sheer, stubborn, irrational grit of human biology kicked in. His brain evolved to filter out useless data to track prey on the African savanna millions of years ago, violently compartmentalize the trauma. The human mind was chaotic enough to accept the impossible. With a thunderous crack that defied the silence of the vacuum, the alien dreadnought ruptured back into normal space. They were floating directly above Earth. The blue marble hung beneath them, beautiful and fragile, entirely covered in the sprawling glowing web of human orbital infrastructure. Massive corporate shipyards, defense platforms, and commercial space elevators crisscrossed the exosphere. Instantly, Caleb's mind was flooded with proximity alarms. The Earth Defense Coalition, a unified military arm funded by the Big Five megacorporations, had detected the massive quantum rupture. "We are being targeted," the custodian stated. 412 orbital defense platforms have achieved missile lock. 30 capital-class cruisers are moving to intercept. They are demanding our immediate surrender and transmitting override codes to our systems. "Let them try," Caleb scoffed. The corporate override codes washed over the alien dreadnought's cybernetic defenses, like a gentle rain falling on a titanium umbrella. The ship's architecture was so terrifyingly advanced that the human hacking attempts registered to the custodian as nothing more than ambient background noise. "Give me global comms," Caleb commanded. "Override every screen, every personal device, every military HUD, and every corporate boardroom broadcast on that planet, and project our image. Let them see what's casting the shadow." Transmitting. Across the Earth, from the neon-soaked streets of Neo-Tokyo to the smog-choked corporate spires of New York, every digital display flickered and died. A moment later, they reignited, showing the live feed from the dreadnought's exterior cameras. The world looked up, or looked at their screens, to see a black teardrop ship the size of Manhattan hovering effortlessly in low Earth orbit, completely ignoring the frantic buzzing swarms of military cruisers surrounding it. Then, Caleb's face appeared on the screens. He was no longer wearing the dirty, cracked helmet of a Rio Tinto slave. The neural interface had woven a subtle, luminescent mesh of blue energy around his collar, illuminating his exhausted but intensely focused eyes. "People of Earth, my name is Caleb Reed. Yesterday I was an independent prospector indentured to the Rio Tinto conglomerate, digging in the dirt so men in glass towers could buy another private moon." His voice echoed across the globe, broadcast in every language simultaneously by the custodian's real-time translation algorithms. "The ships surrounding me right now belong to the Earth Defense Coalition. They are armed with the best kinetic and nuclear weaponry your tax credits and labor can buy. But I am broadcasting this from the helm of a sovereign-class dreadnought, a vessel forged 40 million years ago. If they fire on me, I will not fire back. I will simply turn off their gravity, shut down their reactors, and let them drift." In the boardrooms of Geneva and Orbital Station Prime, corporate executives stared in cold, sweating terror. The telemetry data didn't lie. The energy readings coming off the black ship were astronomical. It was a god among insects. "I didn't come here to conquer you," Caleb continued, leaning forward in the crystalline throne, his gaze piercing through the camera. "I came here to warn you. There is something coming from the Outer Rim, an entity that feeds on advanced civilizations. It's ancient, it's hungry, and it is heading our way." He paused, letting the weight of the revelation sink into the collective consciousness of 30 billion humans. The corporations that rule you cannot save you. Their algorithms, their profit margins, their board meetings, none of it matters to the swarm. The swarm consumes logic. It expects us to be predictable. It expects us to line up and die. Caleb severed the connection to the external cameras, keeping only the audio feed live as the dreadnought suddenly pulsed with a blinding golden energy. The massive ship slowly turned, orienting its prow away from Earth and toward the deep, uncharted black of the cosmos. "But we are humanity," Caleb's voice rang out, filled with a defiant, burning pride. "We are stubborn. We are chaotic. We survive when the math says we shouldn't. I hold the blueprint for this dreadnought in my mind. We're going to build a fleet. We're going to arm ourselves with the fire of the ancients. And when the dark comes for us," Caleb smiled, the custodian's vast power humming in perfect sync with his human heartbeat. "You were going to show them exactly why you never corner a predator." The dreadnought's engines flared, not with exhaust, but with the pure, bending light of a dying star. In a fraction of a second, the black teardrop shot forward, leaving a shock wave that rattled the windows of every orbital station, tearing a new path into the unknown, ready to teach the universe the true meaning of human defiance. Thank you so much for exploring the farthest reaches of the galaxy with us today. If Caleb's defiant journey from indebted miner to the captain of a god-tier dreadnought got your adrenaline pumping, make sure to hit that like button. Share this story with your fellow sci-fi fans, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another epic, pulse-pounding adventure into the unknown. Leave a comment below. What would you do if you found the custodian? See you in the next one.